pillar of cloud to lead them, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. In other words, as they left these 2 million people crossing the desert, it said it was a giant cloud upon them. Have you ever been out in the desert? When I was going to school in Mexico, I went out to this place called San Gil. I was a student in Mexico. My wife and I had just been married and got there, and second year student of theology, and it was Easter week, and they said we want some theology students who want to go preach someplace. You know, I'd never lived in Mexico. I didn't know anything about Mexico. But I said, great, I'll go. There were 15 of us. I was the only one that wasn't Mexican. Didn't know anything about Mexico. And the thing is, there were 15 of us. 15 was important. You know why? Because it's not an even number. And you know what that meant? That somebody had to go by themselves. And guess who ended up going by themselves? I got there, they put me on this bus. It's like, like an old school bus. And they told me, they said, hey, you go there, you stand there, you take the blood. They just give you the color of the bus. It's going to be this color. You get on it. I said, well, where do I go? Oh, don't worry about it. What do you mean don't worry about it? It's the last stop. Oh, okay. When there's nobody on the bus, you're the only one there. And they stop again, that's yours. We got on there, they'll put in there chickens and beans and sacks and everything is going on. I had to go through the back, throw in my suitcase, and then hope to get in through the front. And you get in there, and it was, it's standing on one leg room. And as you travel, it was going through this road, all of a sudden that bus just went right off the road into the desert for 2 hours. You don't see anything. There's no road. There's nothing. He's just driving down the middle of the desert. And I was out there in that desert preaching to a group of people, and it was my first experience, living in the desert. You look up, there is not a cloud in the sky. You want to see blue skies? As the people of Israel were going through that, there was a giant cloud upon them. See, when you walk the way that God leads you, he promises his protection over you. And he will take care of you. And it said that at night it gets cold. And that's the thing about the desert, that in the day it's hot like crazy. But at night it gets cold. And that cloud would turn into a pillar of fire. Talk about having heat and air conditioning. And God provides all these things. God is able to provide for us any place, anywhere, whatever it is that we need. We have a God who is in control of everything. He owns everything. He is the creator of the rain. He is the creator of the clouds. He is the creator of anything. And there is nothing, as you follow this God and you pray to this God and you have a relationship with him, you have to understand that there is nothing impossible for God. And he provided this for his people. And the Lord went before them in a cloud by day. And at night, it was a pillar of fire. The people were having a great time. This was great. They didn't have to work. Slavery was finished. They were on vacation. But then all of a sudden, things changed. If we go to the book of Exodus chapter 14, verse 4, we see the change. Pharaoh had let the people go. They were traveling through the desert under a big cloud, chatting away, talking with one another, getting acquainted with one another, talking about this great land that they were going to go to. But all of a sudden, then it says in chapter 14, verse 4, here it doesn't say something that Pharaoh did. In fact, it says something that God did. It says something that God did. See, and sometimes we explain and we think that everything in this world, and sometimes some Christians try to explain that everything in this world are consequences of what we do. As you study this story, it lets you know that not everything are just consequences. There are things that God does. And he directs them. Because here it says, then verse 14, chapter 14, verse 4, says, then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them. It says, as you guys are just taking it easy, going out there in the desert, I think you're having too much fun. There's more to this. I need to prepare you for more. There's a greater purpose here. And God hardened the heart of Pharaoh so that he would pursue them. And I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. God still needed to prove to them that he was God. You see, these people have been in Egypt for 400 years without even experiencing God. And God needed to do something so that they will experience his power. They will experience his authority, so that they will experience that God will take care of them no matter what. And sometimes God needs to put us through those experiences. And here's the second thing that I want you to remember. The first one was, God's long ways is always accompanied with his presence, while our shortcuts are very lonely. The second thing I want you to learn here is that God creates. I'm not saying natural consequences. God creates human impossibilities to show godly possibilities. God creates human impossibilities to show godly possibilities. And sometimes God will lead us. He will lead us into impossible situations so that we can learn so that we can experience his power and his greatness. And when we do that, we become different people. When you go through a Red Sea experience, when you encounter an impossibility in your life, and you see how God turns that into a possibility, you become a whole different person, don't you? Everything in your life has changed. So God took them the long way. And the long way, they were confronting the Red Sea right before them. And Exodus 14, 8 to 11 says, and the Lord hardened the heart. Exodus chapter 14, verse 8 to 11. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he pursued the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside Pi Hahiroth, before Baal Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt? So they were going down this desert path, with this great cloud over them. But all of a sudden, when they look back, the whole army of Egypt is coming right towards them. and there's no way of escape because what's before them is the Red Sea. Where do we go now? God creates an impossibility. And God creates this impossibility. There is no way out. And as they look back, they begin to complain. That's how we do, right? We begin to complain. We begin to complain to God. And not only to God, they begin to complain to our leaders. They begin to complain to our leaders. Why did this happen? I can't help. I can't help but to think about when about 6 years ago, this church was ready to build and to build their own church. And this church was waiting for a $4 million loan to be able to build. And that loan did not come through. And when that loan did not come through, how bad this church felt. But then you look back at the economy and what's happened in the last 5 years, and what would this church have done with a $4 million debt with the economy the way it went in the past 4 years? What would have happened? You see? When we look, God guides us sometimes the long way. But the long way is His way. And sometimes when things happen, we complain. Why did this? Why did that? And we begin to complain. And the people of Israel began to complain and say, why weren't there any graves in Egypt? Look at what's going on. And they did not know that God was about to show them the most amazing thing they had ever experienced. I mean, what would you have given to have been there and seen that sea separate? They were about to experience the greatest thing. The Red Sea, which is not red, okay? The reason why it's called the Red Sea is because the mountains surrounding the dirt in these mountains are red, so therefore when the sun hits it and they come off the water, it's red, but the water is not red. This was uncrossable. By human standard, the Red Sea is over 1,200 miles long. In other words, let's go up the river and then find another place. You can't do that. But 1,200 miles long, and in some places, is actually a mile deep. Ron White, a well-known archaeologist, about 20 years ago, found where many think is the exact spot this event occurred. It is the Aqaba Gulf. Some scuba divers have actually found old chariot wheels and human remains in that area. As you can see, this place is a perfect description of how the Israelites were boxed in by the mountains to the south, and the Egyptian fortress to the north, Pharaoh's army behind them, and the sea in front. Here the sea is about 5 to 8 miles across and 250 to 300 feet deep. 250 to 300 feet deep. How are you going to get out of this? There was a teacher who didn't believe this. And there was a Christian little girl in school, in a public school, and the teacher was talking about how none of that is true. Actually, the area, the teacher explained, where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea is only about a foot deep. So none of that